we didn't have the infrastructure or the balance sheet to really make it through COVID. We were more than $1 billion in debt at that time. They had to file bankruptcy.
For Americans, Chuck E. Cheese is a childhood memory. But what happens when a brand like this faces bankruptcy? In this episode of Branded, Ben Kaplan sits down with David McKillips, president and CEO of CEC Entertainment.
People grew up with and have fond memories of the place you get the pizza, but also play some games, have some fun. But at the same time, maybe Chuck E. Cheese is closing down in certain neighborhoods or being kind of not updated as much.
Post-COVID, we lost a little of our brand awareness because our greatest marketing vehicle are birthday parties. We host over 500,000 birthday parties globally. And in 2020, during COVID, we weren't in the birthday business. In 2021, as things were just starting to open up, we still weren't back in the birthday business because young families are very overprotective of their young kids. So we said,
you come on, you've been CEO, you have a background in sort of global entertainment business. How do you start thinking about the brand transformation, the brand refresh, which you've been working on until very recently?
Well, I'll tell you what, this is probably the most exciting time ever in CEC's history. And you're right, Chuck E. Cheese has been in business now for 47 years. We're getting ready for our 48th anniversary here shortly. Ben, thanks for having me on today. I appreciate it. I always love sharing this great story. But I joined nearly 5 years to the date of January of 2020. And I was here and I came in with a strategy of really looking to reignite the Chuck E. Cheese brand, which frankly lost its way a little bit because prior ownership was undercapitalized in terms of its growth initiatives for the brand. And, being in theme parks for, almost 20 years and entertainment, I thought the intellectual property of Chuck E. Cheese was so valuable, but we really needed to start with the core product and really turn it around and make it for today's 5-year-olds, which is our core audience.
And I'm the parent of a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old. So
fantastic.
I'm probably the one paying for your core audience, right? To go there. But there was just, I think, a lot of news of multiple bankruptcies and other things. Chuck E. Cheese, like a lot of places, struggled in the pandemic. If you're an in-place location that relies on that, what have you been doing sort of that time to get to this point? And I understand, you completed a sort of a brand refresh, in December recently, December 2024. So what were you kind of doing to sort of stabilize the company first, get through maybe some tough times to sort of get to this point, and then we'll talk about where you are now.
Well, let's talk about where we were. And when I joined, the company was owned by private equity. It was underfunded in terms of capital, hadn't been really refreshed or invested in for a number of years. And quite frankly, the brand got tired. And it was always a profitable brand, but it carried a tremendous amount of debt load. So as COVID started infiltrating not only the global markets, but the United States, and we had to close doors, we didn't have the infrastructure or the balance sheet to really make it through COVID. And we were more than $1 billion in debt at that time. We made the decision to do a debt for equity swap and did a Chapter 11 restructuring, which was really the only way that we could save this company, given the climate, the real tough climate during COVID. And quite frankly, it was the right move because we brought on new ownership. We were able to shed over $700 million in our debt load. And then we refinanced the company the following April of 2021 to the tune of about $650 million in bonds. And at that point, we worked with our board, we worked with our management team and said, okay, what's the future of Chuck E. Cheese? And the first thing we needed to do was deploy capital back into the stores and reimagine Chuck E. Cheese for a whole new generation of your kids, right? 3, 4, 5, 6, 7-year-olds, because the competition was fierce post-COVID. There was such a sense of families wanting to get out and play, and you could see the growth in trampoline parks and multi-activity centers. We had to get right back in that, and we started a brand refresh program that became a transformation, the most aggressive transformation in entertainment across the globe. $350 million have been deployed to remodel every single location in the United States. Now we're doing it internationally, and we also put our arms around active play, which was so important for parents post-COVID.
How much of the challenge for you was just like logistics, organization, physically remodeling places? How much of it was sort of thinking about the intellectual property, because you have a background in, a number of places where obviously like intellectual property is the entire business. So how much of that was just thinking about the IP versus how much of it was just operations, logistics, because you have to deliver a good experience regardless if you have great IP or not?
Yeah, well, first of all, this guy behind my shoulder here has one of the most popular Q scores of any any property reaching kids today. However, when you're in the business of intellectual property, licensing, franchising, and really expanding your product outside of your core and getting into new areas, like apparel or toys or games or things like that, we had to make sure that the product was fixed. Because you can't go out and talk about, I've got an all new Chuck E. Cheese and everything is wonderful. But then if you go down the street and you go to the Chuck E. Cheese and it hasn't been remodeled and it's dated, we're going to disappoint a consumer, or disappoint a guest, because we're talking about this all new product. So the first thing we needed to do was hold on some of the expansion plans and focus on the core. So the challenge at the time, post-COVID, inflation was racing. Also, consumers had some money in their pockets, especially many government-funded subsidy programs allowed some new consumers to spend more than they've ever had. But three, it was tough at the time to hire, right? Because of the subsidies, there was a challenge in labor. And then lastly, the cost side of remodeling, games, carpeting, wood, labor, all of that was such a challenge at that time when we wanted to go fast.
Well, also supply chains, right? Because it's crazy to you couldn't get this thing, wait around for 6 months. You couldn't do things, even if you wanted to and had plenty of money to do it.
That's correct. So there was a lot of competition out there of companies wanting to grow post-COVID. And there was that halo, that post-COVID bounce that a lot of retailers and restaurants enjoyed. We didn't get that per se, because you have to remember, and you live at this at home now, we're catering to a young family. And typically young families are a little bit lower on the income scale because they're just getting their career started, number one. Two, we lost a little of our brand awareness because our greatest marketing vehicle are birthday parties. So if you think about it, most of the kids that come to Chuck E. Cheese today, the first experience they've had is through a birthday party. We host over 500,000 birthday parties globally. And in 2020, during COVID, we weren't in the birthday business. In 2021, as things were just starting to open up, we still weren't back in the birthday business because young families, especially moms, are very overprotective of their young kids, right? So when adults were heading out to restaurants and heading out to the bars and going out and spending money and having that, we didn't enjoy that bounce yet because there was some protection from just young families with little kids, right? Because there was just so many unknowns coming out of COVID. Then fast forward to 2022, and that was the second wave of COVID. That was really tough for us because the world had opened up, but we still had restrictions in Los Angeles and New York and some of the other bigger cities. And that was a real problem for us. But at that same time, we were committed to the remodel and we were committed to the long term. So what you saw in 2023, and I'm fast forwarding so you can really understand the journey, is 2023, all of these kids that were born in late 19 and 20 are starting to have birthday parties at Chuck E. Cheese. So we saw this huge bounce, right, of everyone coming out and saying, hey, this is the first time my 3 or 4 year old is going to be able to have a birthday at Chuck E. Cheese. So that was enormous for us. So we really enjoyed that bounce. And at that time, all of the stores were starting to get remodeled. We hit the milestones of 100, 150, 200, 250, 300. And we continued to press on. We did over 100 remodels the past 3 years and just finished up the program 2 months ago in December. It was absolutely incredible. $350 million investment we have made to transform the product. And we're talking about a transformation, Ben, that's unbelievable. We grew up with the Chuck E. Cheese, with the animatronics, the great games, and great food. But today's 5-year-old's consuming entertainment in a different way. And we have to look at our product through the eyes of a 5-year-old.
How did it shift? What's the biggest difference from I guess I'm the dad now. So your dad's Chuck E. Cheese and today's 5-year-old's Chuck E. Cheese. What shifted if you walk in now?
Well, virtually everything. So you start from just the decor. It's got a new color palette. It is clean. It is bright. We still have our patented kid check where families come together. They can leave together. But it was a digital transformation in the operation and in the entertainment. So you're talking about digital menu boards, kiosks that we brought in, pagers for pizza pickup. Then you look at the entertainment side, which is near and dear to our guests' heart more than anything else. We removed the animatronics. We saved them at a couple stores for legacy purposes, but We replaced the animatronics with all new entertainment, a digital dance floor to ceiling jumbotrons, a new television network. We also brought in new games with the biggest brands that kids absolutely love. And then finally, we looked at the menu and we upgraded our pizza. We have scratch-made pizza that we make our dough every day. We're making our sauce, we're grating our cheese, we're cutting our vegetables. It is a fabulous product. So now every single element of the Chuck E. Cheese experience is elevated and reimagined.
And what about the character? Like behind you now, I see Chuck E. Cheese. I see the mouse. Like, what were you touching? What were you not touching? Were there guardrails? How did you sort of refresh the character itself, the core of your IP?
So we moved from the animatronic program to a live character appearance. Chucky comes out every hour and a half hour. And there's a countdown. There's great interaction between the character and kids. It's a personal interaction. They're high-fiving, they're giving a hug, they're dancing with the character, and that's great.
Did the appearance of the character change? Did you refresh anything, the colors as part of this new color palette, or what? How do you kind of think about IP like that, where it's like, hey, we have something that you're saying has a high Q score. We don't want to affect it too much, but we're going to deliver it differently. Are you keeping the elements the same, or do you think about any update?
We've evolved the characters somewhat. Now, prior to me joining the company, its entertainment department did a fabulous job reimagining the Chuck E. Cheese that you see behind me, right? There's been iterations of Chuck E. Cheese throughout the years, like any other character. And he's grown to be, this lovable mouse that is very friendly and kids love. So his favorite color is purple. But what we wanted to do is make Chuck E. Cheese's personality really come to life. And we've done that with great content on YouTube and YouTube Kids. And we also bring that content within our four walls. Music is really important. So when things were shut for COVID, we decided as a group of how do we expand the Chuck E. Cheese entertainment experience into home? And at that time, we were dropping streaming albums. We had new streaming content on YouTube and YouTube Kids. And we were able to connect to kids, and they could bring that experience back to Chuck E. Cheese live.
Because there was issues, you were rolling this out very quickly. I mean, how did you think about like sort of testing the response? Did you do trial places, or you had to sort of like make the commitment and go across the board? Or how were you kind of getting feedback on something like this? Like, if kids don't respond how you like, there's something else you haven't thought about. How do you just think about all of that?
We have tested every element of the experience. So the beautiful part of having over 450 locations that you are constantly testing new things. And whether it's new entertainment, whether it's new menu item, new games, we test everything. And as soon as it works or it doesn't, if it doesn't, we fail fast, we shut it down. If it does work, we can move fast. Let me give you a great example. After COVID, parents were coming back in with their kids. And at that time, our entertainment was really regulated to arcade games and having the Chuck E. Cheese experience. And having himself come out every hour and a half hour. But parents are saying, I want my kids to play actively. I want them running around. And, we're taking them to the trampoline parks and we're taking them to the activity parks. And it was a lot of fun. And it was very rewarding for parents to see their kids running around, especially when you're cooped up in some of the northern states and they didn't go out. So we had one of our locations in Brooklyn, New York, that was way down in terms of comparable sales versus 2019. And we couldn't figure out why guests weren't coming back. We saw that there was some competitors moving into the Brooklyn market that were more activity based. So we said, you know what, let's give this a try. Let's bring in a trampoline. And so, to fit with our mission, it's wholesome, safe family entertainment. We wanted to make sure that it was safe. We wanted to make sure it was perfectly set for today's 2, 3, 4, 5-year-olds. So we did a height restricted small trampoline that turned out to be a real hit in Brooklyn. And kids would come in and they would bounce and play games and really enjoy themselves. So then we said, okay, well, let's test market this in a couple other areas. Maybe this is unique to Brooklyn, maybe not. So we did Miami, then we did Orlando, then we did Washington, D.C. and St. Louis, Missouri. And we saw consistent performances everywhere. That was late 2023. And we felt so confident that this was such an important part of now our new DNA. We expanded Active Play to every single location in 2024. Now 460 locations have trampolines. And the next evolution of that is a full adventure zone where we're going to have a playground, an obstacle course, and a trampoline all in one.
When you're doing this kind of transformation, I mean, it's one thing to do this at sort of like the corporate company level, but you have franchisees, you have others who are staking this. So how do you think about the messaging, what you're communicating, what you're doing, what they're doing, new franchisees, how does that fit into all of these upgrades and changes?
We work simultaneously with our field teams, and we have regional vice presidents and district managers that oversee their areas. And the feedback that we get from the field is so impactful. So it's not a corporate driven initiative. We work all the time with our local folks, and they give us feedback. We get the feedback on a daily basis. We look at our BI reports. We have our operational calls. We see what works and frankly what doesn't, and then we make those judgment calls. But we empower our districts, we empower our regions to really lead with new ideas. And we have great communication to and from our support center. So when we see something that works and can work not only for our full set of locations nationally, but even internationally, we bring that to the market.
The other part that's interesting is you've sort of said you envision this like a global entertainment brand. Like that's kind of a big statement. I know you have a background in this from many places, but what does that mean? I mean, does that mean the character Chuck E. Cheese itself? I mean, and by the way, we've done like we did work to help launch the Secret Life of Pets movie.
Okay, great.
We've done work on this, so we're kind of familiar with building IP around characters, and then how do you market it? But what does it mean to be like a global entertainment brand, and where would Chuck E. Cheese head? And would you start to see the character or other elements outside of these restaurant locations?
So yeah, the vision is to be a global entertainment company. And you've got air support and ground support. That's how I look at it. And our ground support is our restaurants and what we call them internally fun centers. And we are right now operating in 18 countries and territories worldwide. We've got a strong presence in South America. We're all over Mexico, as well as the Middle East. So we've got 26 locations in the kingdom. We just opened up in Cairo, Egypt, and signed a 10-store deal in Australia. But there are pockets all over the world that would work perfectly for a Chuck E. Cheese. And you look at Southeast Asia and China, South Korea, both Eastern and Western Europe. Those are India. There's major locations that we think we could go in and operate fun centers. But on top of that, a great introduction of the intellectual property of Chuck E. Cheese himself, along with all his friends, is entertainment. So I talked a little bit about the content we have on YouTube and YouTube Kids. There's no difference if we're looking at expanding our character. We can do that online by streaming our new content. And ultimately, I'd love to have animation that you would see either on CTV or linear TV. And then, I think our real aspiration is to have a feature movie one day. And that's something that we're having a lot of great discussions right now. Nothing on the books, but ultimately, that would really be incredible for this intellectual property and brand.
And what do you learn from some of your past notable places you've been at? What do you take with you that impacts Chuck E. Cheese now? Like, what do you take from each one?
Brand consistency is so important. And if you look at some of the brands that I've represented in the past, Sesame Street, DC Comics superheroes, Six Flags, theme parks, each one of them, fit in such a way that they could be expanded globally, yet have flexibility on a local market. So let me give you an example. For Chuck E. Cheese, it's all about that safe, wholesome family entertainment, right? We want to live in a box that delivers on that mission. It's a safe place for families and kids to come in, especially young families with kids 3 to 8 years old, right? We are that safe place. We want to make sure that resides in our content as well as our experience if you come into the four walls. We can take that anywhere around the world now. And we have that brand flexibility. So whether it's active play, if you go to Cairo, we've got zip lines, we've got rock walls, we've got, incredible games and birthday parties and party rooms and everything else like that. That fits perfectly, but that looks very different than how we look in Madison, Wisconsin, as an example, right? But it still fits with that vision. So when we're looking at the development of the intellectual property of Chuck E. Cheese, we want to create puppetry, animation, feature movie, anything like that can have that consistency where consumers are going to go, no matter what language they speak, when they see Chuck E. Cheese, they know it's safe, wholesome family entertainment.
So one, you were at DC Comics. DC Comics, to me, when I think of it, it's a licensing company. I mean, what that is, it has great value in licensing. So what do you take for DC Comics that, impacts you now? What does DC Comics do great that can impact you at Chuck E. Cheese now?
Well, I'll tell you what's great about DC Comics, and I'll tell you about the character Batman specifically. When we were working with Batman, there was 3 iterations of the character. There was a animated character, a Batman that was on Cartoon Network. There was a comic book version that was more akin to teenagers and young adults. And then there was the darker Batman that you would see on the feature movie, right? And so there was an iteration of Batman that could fulfill any one of the fans' needs. And whether you're a 6-year-old running around in your Batman underoos, or you're a 60-year-old who loves Batman and was, exposed to the character from a multi-generational perspective, it has that kind of bandwidth. As we're knocking on the door of being a 50-year-old legacy brand, it's the same thing for Chuck E. Cheese. And when you look at a licensing program, I talked about safe, wholesome family entertainment. Yes, that's our core character, but we also have our vintage and our retro characters that you and I, Ben, grew up with, right? And we may have an affinity. So when we now look at licensing, we can have that conversation with a retailer. And we now have like some of our vintage items that are being sold at Spencer Goods as an example. Or you can find some of our old logo apparel on 80s shop.com. And then you find our current Chucky behind me right here. You'll find us at Kohl's and toys at Walmart and things like that. So we have great bandwidth with this character, a lot of flexibility with what we are from an infrastructure perspective. But when you step into entertainment, we have the ability to really broaden our awareness and desire for consumer goods from kids all the way to adults.
Let's go on the other side. So something like Six Flags, where you were a senior leader overseeing us, it looks, I think, especially international development operations. What do you take from that for Chuck E. Cheese in terms of obviously large scale physical locations, but also international expansion?
Brand flexibility. You have to have consistency in your core values, but be flexible so you can be an international brand with local affinity. And, I look at that from, we'll take it from an infrastructure perspective. How we look in Saudi Arabia is different than how we look here in Dallas, Texas, right? We have 2 floors, it's hundreds of games. It's a bigger activity presence. I talked about rock wall, zip lines. We have some of our other locations internationally, but we're also flexible on our menu. Right. So it's not just the menu that you're going to see here in North America, but when we talk to franchisees, especially internationally, the menu palette, the appetites, the nutritional, aspirations are all different. So we've got some of our locations that have great Cuban coffee bars down, in Miami, as an example. Our best-selling pizza is a barbecue pizza in Mexico, in Monterrey. And you'll find different flavors. So I think it's really important. And what we did at Six Flags when we were building the parks, and I'm really proud that the new Six Flags Qiddiya will be open up next year in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. What a fantastic park. But that is all about taking the best of Six Flags, those great rides that they're known for, but then localizing the experience for the folks in the Middle East.
How does this all fit in? I mean, at least the food side of your operation and sort of the fast casual trends that you see, which include a few. I mean, you see like a move towards digital, and you see an emphasis on loyalty and people, in-app offers, points, and then you also see personalization as more of a trend as well, as more of like a personal solution. Is any of that reflected in Chuck E. Cheese now? Do you see yourself in some of those trends, or do you view it differently because you got that core audience and 5-year-old, and the 5-year-old doesn't care about any of that?
Well, the 5-year-old doesn't, but the parents do. So what we try to do, let me break that down a little bit, right? Because we're an interesting business. We're the 10th largest pizza company in the world, but we're really not in the pizza business. We're in the entertainment business. The majority of revenue that we drive from our locations is all driven from our games, our entertainment and merchandise, right? It's not so much the food. It's a great complement. It's a great product, but we're in the entertainment business, right? That's number one. So for us to get into delivery, it's a piece of our business, but it's not a material piece of our business. But when you start talking about personalization and you look at loyalty programs, that's exactly where we have gone and invested the last couple of years. Because for us to personalize the experience and make it valuable for today's consumer, especially those who are really strapped, inflation hasn't slowed down whatsoever. Young families are still fighting over their discretionary dollars that they can use to go out to eat or for out-of-home entertainment. So we have created value platforms, not traditional loyalty clubs, because that doesn't really fit for us. We're not the coffee shop or a QSR where you're going to go, once, twice a month. You're going to come to us 1.5, maybe 2 times a year, right? So a traditional loyalty program doesn't work for us. But what we did is we tested a membership program. We started this summer with a 2-month program. It's called it's called the Chuck E. Cheese Fun Pass, and it was for 60 days. And there was 3 different levels of bronze, silver, and gold. And you could visit every single day you would get a allotted amount of points where you could play games, right? Starting with 50 points a day, and you can come in with your kids, and there was discounts off food and beverage. And it was really something special, and it met a value conscious consumer, which we really needed to meet at that point. We sold over 400,000 summer fun passes this last summer. In tandem, we tested a membership program, a 12-month membership program where you pay monthly, but you sign up for a 12-month contract, and that has been a home run for us. We have already sold close to 150,000 of those just in 5 months. That's transformed our business. Because now, instead of visiting 1.5 to 2 times a year, we're now seeing these guests come 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times a year, because we've got the product fixed, multi-activities where kids can come and play active play arcade games, play sports games, dance with our new content, dance with our digital dance floor. Parents have a great time. There's discounts off food and beverage. That's what's clicking for this brand today.
Well, and I think it's interesting to kind of think of, you have a global brand, you have a global entertainment company, but what can you like listen to from the local and all the places that might be just like Tots Playground and other things that doesn't seem related, but all of the forms that they're providing, I don't know, punch card access and membership programs and other ways, because it's interesting how you would sort of compete with global brands, but you could compete in a community with a very local operator of, a top playground area. And maybe you could learn something from what works in each of those communities in terms of, delivering a product that makes sense for the parent, which I am a consumer of now, of all of these places.
Look, we do that. That's why you've seen the introduction of Active Play. That's why you see Evolve our games, our digital footprint. Anyone can open an arcade. Anybody can open up an activity center, but only we can open a Chuck E. Cheese, because we got that intellectual property of the greatest mouse in entertainment.
David, what is the worst advice you've ever received along your journey to become a CEO? Did you ever get bad advice along the way?
I did get some bad advice. Someone said, don't help other people, only take care of yourself.
Who would give that advice?
I came up through the sales channel, and it was you eat what you kill. And, it was a very aggressive sales environment that I was in, and like, don't help anybody else. You're on your own, do it, chase the money. And that just didn't feel right. And, that was probably some of the worst advice I ever had. Thank goodness I didn't take it.
What was the best advice you've gotten, either along your growth or even as CEO now? I don't know if there's others you chat with and talk with, other CEOs. What is the best advice you've received?
I do chat with other CEOs in the business, and it's been helpful because a lot of people have the same challenges, right? But I think some of the best advice I've ever received in my life was my first boss at DC Comics. His name was Joel Ehrlich, a very charismatic leader. And he said to me, because I was a young leader at the time, he said, look, now is the time when you're young, get everyone to like you. You want everyone to like you in your early part of your career, because as you grow and you lead, ultimately in a leadership position, you got to make hard calls. And the more fans that you can have, the more people that understand where you're coming from, the better you're going to be able to deliver a hard message with understanding. And that was it. So I've tried to make great friends as I was growing up through the ranks. And then when I got into leadership positions, you're forced to make tough decisions. And when people respect you, like you, they understand where you're coming from when you make those decisions.
I enjoy on your LinkedIn. I mean, I was looking at it, and of course I see, your CEO position now, lots of senior positions at Six Flags, DC Comics, and others. But I go back all the way down and I see shift manager cook, Ken's Pizza. I like that a lot on your LinkedIn, that you still have that there. And do you think it's important to understand in a business all parts of every part that people do, if you're going to be an effective leader, that you have to have some experience in each part?
100%. I love that job at Ken's Pizza. It was my first job. I had a key to the restaurant at 15 years old. I learned to love pizza. I still eat pizza almost every single day. And it was incredible. There was nothing better than the rush of a Friday night, and the phones are ringing, and you're all backed up, and it was great. I loved that business. I put it on my LinkedIn on purpose a couple of years ago, and I was able to go to the Pizza Awards and be honored for something there. And it was so great to think back of being 15 years old and riding a bike back and forth literally miles to get to Ken's Pizza. Loved it there.
And final question for you is, what is your advice for other business leaders, marketing leaders that think they have more to potentially unlock in their IP or their brand or their intellectual property? Maybe it's a character, maybe it's something else. What is your advice for maybe thinking big, but not too big? How do you sort of expand and start utilizing your IP and your brand better?
I think thinking big is important, but you need to know where you started. You got to rack up some small wins, right? So you can't immediately create a character and then go to Walmart and sell a bunch of merchandise. That's not how it works. What you need is to create a character, create depth in that character, look at how it's viewed from your core audience, if it's parents or it's men or women or teenagers or whatever that character is. Just pour your life into it and make sure that there's brand consistency. And I think that's really important. And be protective of who you license that character to, because you're all, the most important is who holds the license to that character. Make sure that they love it as much as you do as the owner. And that's an opportunity. And then just keep knocking on doors, and someone is going to have a shared vision with you. And we do that same thing today. I started this journey 5 years ago with Chuck E. Cheese, and I was knocking on doors, and people are like, "Well, what do you mean Chuck E. Cheese is a animated film? I don't get it." But now that we're talking about it, now that we've invested in the character, we brought the character on the road and have live concerts, choreographed concerts. We had one at the Santa Monica Pier. It was fantastic. So you'll keep investing in that character, and people will understand, and just never accept no. Just keep pressing forward.
All right, David McKillips, thank you for joining us on Branded, and we can't wait to see where Chuck E. Cheese goes next. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Ben.